I destroyed my entire family's life with one pot of dirty dishwater. I didn't cheat. I didn't steal. I didn't kill anyone. I just poured what was in my kitchen sink over the wrong man in the wrong house on the wrong night. Yeah, that happened. My name is Linda, and if you had met me a year ago, you probably would have thought I had it all together. Big house in Westchester Hills. Manicured lawn cars in the driveway that still smelled like the dealership. A husband with 30 years at a stable company. 2 kids with promising careers. A dining room table that looked like something out of one of those home magazines. On paper, I was that woman, the one who made it, the one who knew how the world works. But paper lies. This is the story of how I found out I didn't understand anything at all. It's the story of my daughter's ex-husband, the nobody I treated like trash, and what happens when you finally push the quiet man in the room just a little too far. If it were you, what would you have done? Let me take you back to that night. It was a Sunday, our usual family dinner day. In my head, Sunday dinner was proof that I'd done something right in life. The Morrison estate, as people like to call it, sat in a neighborhood where the grass looked like it was measured with a ruler, and the houses cost more than most people make in a lifetime. Westchester Hills. You drive through those winding streets, and you see money on every corner. Polished cars, stone walls, security systems, delivery trucks bringing in whatever people bought that week to feel successful. Inside our house, the chandeliers were on, casting that soft golden light over the mahogany dining table. The good china was out. My pot roast was in the oven. The wine was breathing on the sideboard. My husband, Gerald, still wore a suit, even though it was the weekend, because that's what men like him do when they've spent 30 years climbing up a corporate ladder. It becomes a second skin. My son Marcus had his tablet out, half checking emails, half thinking about his own promotion path at the same company. And me, I was in the kitchen draining potatoes in the sink, already picturing how perfect everything was going to look when I brought that roast out. We were a Caldwell Industries family. That's the company that paid for all of it. Gerald had been there for 3 decades, senior director of operations. Marcus was in management, and already talking about vice president before 40. I worked as an executive assistant, and I was good at it. Organized, efficient, always knowing who to talk to and how to position myself. That was a word I liked back then. Positioning. To me, life was basically one long, careful positioning of yourself around power, money, and status. My daughter, Rebecca, she was my pride. My beautiful girl. She'd married young, and in my mind, she'd made a mistake the first time around. She married a man named James. Quiet, no obvious ambition, some vague entry-level job at Caldwell. The kind of position that doesn't impress anybody at Christmas parties. He didn't play golf with Gerald, didn't talk stock options with Marcus, didn't brag about his income. He showed up at our house wearing jeans that looked too old and jackets that were too plain, and he had this calm way about him that honestly made me nervous. You know, the type of man people just look past in a room because he doesn't demand attention. That was James. When Rebecca divorced him 6 months before that dinner, I was relieved. I won't even pretend otherwise. She came home one day, makeup streaked down her face, talking about how she couldn't do it anymore, how he was holding her back, how she deserved more than a man who was content with mediocrity. Those were her words. Content with mediocrity. And I believed her. I told her she did the right thing. I told her a woman like her needed someone who could provide the lifestyle she deserved. Then she started dating David. David was everything James wasn't, at least on the surface. Slick, confident, big smile. Big watch, a Porsche that might as well have been another limb. Sales executive at a rival firm. The kind of man who would tell you exactly how much his watch cost without you even asking. He took her to expensive restaurants, bought her jewelry, took photos, holding her waist with those big look what I have hands. I looked at David and thought, now this is a real man. This is the kind of guy my daughter should be with. You know what I mean. I didn't realize I was saying more about me than I was about either of them. That Sunday dinner was supposed to be a little celebration. Rebecca and David coming over, my pot roast on the table. My family together, all of us living the life that 30 years at Caldwell had earned us. I was in the kitchen stirring the gravy, draining the potatoes. The water in the sink, cloudy and gray with starch bits of peel floating around, and feeling very pleased with myself. And then the doorbell rang. Now, normally, Sunday dinner was just us. We didn't really do surprise guests unless they were the kind of people you boast about. I heard the bell. Then I heard something else. A sharp intake of breath from the dining room, a sound I knew instantly was Rebecca's. "Mom, don't answer it," she called out. There was panic in her voice, a kind I'd never heard before, and my first thought was, what on earth is she hiding? But Gerald was already out of his chair. He's old school, opens his own front door, especially when he feels like he owns the world on the other side of it. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to stand where I could see the foyer. Gerald pulled the door open, and there he was. James, standing on our front step in worn jeans and a faded jacket that probably cost less than the doormat he was standing on. He looked thinner than I remembered him, hair a little longer. Same calm eyes that never gave me as much frustration as they did. This weird, unsettling feeling, like he could see something I couldn't. "James," Gerald said, and I swear his entire voice turned to ice in 1 second. "What are you doing here? You're not welcome in this house anymore. Rebecca made her choice and we support her." I know James said his voice even unremarkable, like he was talking about the weather. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Gerald. I just wanted to talk to Rebecca for a moment. There are some papers she needs to sign, some final details about the divorce settlement." Every part of that sentence rubbed me the wrong way. My daughter had finally moved on. And here he was on my porch in those same stupid jeans, reminding us of how she'd wasted 3 years of her life. I stepped closer, wiping imaginary something from my hands, irritation burning through me. "Whatever papers you have can be mailed," I snapped, taking my place beside my husband. "This is family time, and you are not family anymore, James. You need to leave." He looked past us into the dining room. His eyes found Rebecca, and something in the air shifted. Rebecca was sitting at the table, David beside her, Marcus on the other side. The moment their eyes met, all the color drained from her face. Her hands gripped the edge of the table so hard, her knuckles went white. That's when I noticed it. Fear, not anger, not annoyance, not even guilt. Fear. "Hey, Rebecca." David's voice floated out from the dining room, loud and dripping with contempt. "Is that your loser ex-husband? The one who couldn't even afford a decent vacation? Tell him to get lost. We're trying to enjoy dinner here." Marcus pushed his chair back, came to stand behind us, half laughing already. "Seriously, man, what part of divorced don't you understand?" he said. "My sister upgraded. She's with a real man now, someone who actually has money and prospects." James didn't rise to it. He just kept looking at Rebecca, completely ignoring the 2 men puffing themselves up in front of him. "Rebecca knows," he said quietly. "She knows why I'm here and what this is about. Don't you, Rebecca?" She stood up slowly. Her chair scraped hard against the floor. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "James, please," she said. "Please don't. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about everything. Just leave, and we can forget this. Please." Forget what? That was the question clawing at my throat. Why was my daughter begging this man? Why did she look more terrified than angry? It made no sense, and I hate it when things don't make sense. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, turning on her. "What truth? What is going on here?" "Rebecca," she couldn't answer. She just kept staring at James with this desperate, broken expression. Gerald was done with it. He stepped forward, shoulders squared. "I don't know what kind of mind games you think you're playing," he growled. "But you need to get out of my house right now before I call the police. You're trespassing and harassing my daughter." James finally looked away from Rebecca and shifted his attention back to Gerald. And in that moment, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Not anger, not hurt. Just this quiet, settled decision. He stepped inside. He didn't shove anyone, didn't raise his voice. He just crossed the threshold with a calmness that infuriated me. How dare he? I felt my irritation spike into hot anger. This man had wasted 3 years of my daughter's life, dragged her down, embarrassed us with his lack of success. And now he was going to walk into my home like he belonged here. No, absolutely not. I turned on my heel and went back into the kitchen, every step fueling this righteous fury inside me. The sink was still full of the water from the boiled potatoes, cloudy gray with little bits of peel floating on top, the pot sitting right there. And something in me snapped. I told myself in that moment that he needed to understand his place. I told myself I was protecting my daughter, defending my family, teaching a lesson to a man who refused to accept that he was no longer welcome in our world. The truth I wanted to hurt him. I grabbed the pot with both hands, feeling the warm weight of the dirty water, and marched back into the foyer. James was standing there just inside the door, still looking at Rebecca. He barely moved as I came up in front of him. "You want to know what we think of you?" I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You want to understand your place in this family, James. Let me show you." Before anyone could react, I lifted the pot and poured. The water came out in one ugly rush, gray, and streaked with bits of potato and peel. It hit his head, splashed over his face. Soaked his jacket, ran down his jeans, pooled around his shoes. Potato peels slid down his shoulders like disgusting little ribbons and landed with soft plops on the hardwood floor. For 1 second, the house was completely silent. Then David burst into laughter. Loud, sharp, ugly laughter. He pointed at James like he was some street performer doing a trick. "Oh my God," he choked out between laughs. "That is perfect. That is exactly what this loser deserves." Marcus joined in, slapping the wall energy high from the cruelty, feeding off David's reaction. "Mom." "That's savage," he crowed. "I love it." Gerald didn't laugh, but he didn't stop it either. He stood there with his arms crossed, this grimly satisfied look on his face, like justice had finally been served. I set the empty pot down with a clang and straightened my apron. I felt victorious, like I'd finally put James in his place. Like maybe now he'd understand that in our world, in this house, that Caldwell money paid for, he was nothing. And then I made the biggest mistake of my life. I looked at his face. Water was dripping from his hair, running down his cheeks, catching on his jaw, soaking into his collar. Potato peels clung to his jacket, slowly sliding off onto the floor. But he wasn't yelling. He wasn't furious. He wasn't even really embarrassed. He smiled. Not a big, crazy smile. Just that same small, strange, knowing smile that had always made my stomach tighten in this weird, uneasy way. The one I ignored for years because I didn't want to admit it scared me. That smile. He reached into his jacket pocket, moving slowly, deliberately pulled out his phone and pressed a single button. "Hello, Victoria," he said. His voice calm, almost pleasant, while dirty water dripped from his chin. "Yes, it's time. Initiate the Morrison protocol we discussed. All of it. Effective immediately." "Yes, I'm certain." "Thank you." He ended the call, slid the phone back into his pocket, and looked up at us, water still dripping from his hair onto the floor. Pattern interrupt. That was the sound of my life cracking in half, and I didn't know it yet. "You know," he said conversationally, as if we were chatting about work, "I gave you so many chances to be kind, Rebecca. So many opportunities to show your family who I really was. But you never wanted them to know, did you? You liked keeping them in the dark. You liked letting them think I was nothing. What the hell are you talking about? David snapped, irritation replacing the laughter. And who's Victoria? Your imaginary secretary, Han. You're more pathetic than she said. James ignored him completely. His eyes were still on my daughter. Tell them, he said softly. Tell them who I really am. Tell them where you really worked for the past 3 years. Tell them the truth you've been hiding because you were ashamed. Rebecca's shoulders shook. She started to cry. Not angry tears, not dramatic tears, but this quiet, devastated crying that terrified me. I can't, she whispered. James, please. I'll do anything. I'll call David right now and end it. I'll fix this somehow, just please don't do this. Don't do this to them. I felt fear crawl up my spine. Do what to us, I demanded. What is he talking about, Rebecca? What truth? She just shook her head and sobbed harder. Gerald stepped forward again, anger overriding confusion. I don't care who you think you are, he said. You're not scaring my family. Get out of my house. James turned his gaze on him, and his expression shifted just a little. Not anger, not cruelty, just this cold, clear certainty. Your house, he repeated quietly. Bought with your salary from Caldwell Industries, where you've worked for 30 years. Where you're senior director of operations. Where your son Marcus is a department manager. Where your wife is an executive assistant. Where your daughter worked in marketing until 6 months ago, when she quit right after our divorce because she couldn't stand to face the truth every day. He let that sink in, the sound of our own titles bouncing back at us like accusations. So what Marcus said a little too loud. Yeah, we work for Caldwell. It's a great company. We've built our careers there. What does that have to do with anything? James smiled again, and this time there was something sharp in it. It has everything to do with everything he said, because I am Caldwell Industries. Or more specifically, I'm James Caldwell, sole owner and CEO of Caldwell Industries, a position I've held since I inherited the company from my father 8 years ago. 2 years before I met Rebecca at that charity gala my company sponsored. There it was, the twist. If you've ever felt the room tilt under your feet while you're standing still, you know what I felt in that moment. The elegant dining room seemed to move. The chandelier lights seemed too bright, the air too thin. That was impossible. James, my daughter's ex-husband. The man I'd dismissed as a failure. The man whose genes I'd judged, whose truck I'd criticized, whose quietness I'd mocked, could not be that James Caldwell. The reclusive billionaire whose name was on the building all of us walked into every morning. The one whose wealth people whispered about in the break room. The man everyone talked about, but nobody had seen. But as I looked at him, standing there soaking wet in my foyer, water dripping onto my hardwood floor, I saw what I had refused to see before. The confidence underneath the quiet, the intelligence behind his eyes, the patience, the control, and my daughter's reaction. Rebecca collapsed into her chair, face buried in her hands, sobs shaking her whole body. David turned to her in disbelief. You were married to James Caldwell, he demanded. The James Caldwell. And you never told me. And you divorced him. He actually laughed once, this baffled, ugly sound. Are you insane? Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. You could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Then Gerald's phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. He looked down, saw the caller ID, and I watched the color drain from his face. HR, he answered with a shaking hand. Hello? Yes. He listened, his jaw-working lips trembling. I understand. He whispered and hung up. That was HR, he said, staring at James like he'd never seen him before. They said I'm terminated, effective immediately. 30 years, and I'm just terminated. They said the CEO personally ordered it, and that security will be waiting tomorrow to escort me out if I try to come in. A second later, Marcus's phone rang. Same number, same script, same stunned silence afterward. I'm fired too, he said numbly. Me and Dad and Mom, all three of us, effective immediately. How is this happening? My phone had a missed call from HR. I didn't even need to listen to the voicemail. I knew exactly what it would say. James took out a handkerchief and started gently wiping the water from his face. You have 24 hours to vacate this house, he said calmly, like he was talking about a scheduling change. It's company property, technically part of Gerald's compensation package. Since he no longer works for the company, you no longer have access to company assets. There's a clause in the contract about termination for cause and immediate forfeiture of housing benefits. It's all very clear. You can't do this, I heard myself say. The words sounded far away. We have rights. We have protections. You can't just fire us all and kick us out of our home. I can actually, James replied. You can consult lawyers if you want, but you'll find that at-will employment and the specific clauses in your contracts give me significant latitude, especially when there's documented cause. And Victoria has been very thorough over the years. He glanced at Rebecca again, and for a second his expression softened, though there was still steel underneath. I loved you, he said to her voice quieter now. I would have given you everything, Rebecca. I would have made you the happiest woman alive. But you were ashamed of me from the start. You never told your family who I really was, because you wanted a different kind of rich man, one who performed wealth for you. You wanted flash, not substance. You filed for divorce without even giving me a chance to explain why I live the way I do. Rebecca looked up, mascara streaked down her cheeks, eyes swollen. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, James. I was stupid and shallow, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, I'll do anything. I'll fix it, just please don't destroy my family. I'm not destroying your family, he said, already moving toward the door. I'm removing myself from your lives completely, which is what you all wanted. You made it very clear tonight what you think of me, how little I matter. So now you'll build your lives without any connection to me whatsoever. No job at my company, no house paid for with my money, no benefits from my success. You wanted nothing to do with me, and now you'll have exactly that. He stepped carefully over the puddle of dirty water and potato peels, leaving wet footprints on the floor as he went. He paused at the door, looked back at me. You poured dirty water on me, he said softly, because you thought I was trash. But that water was probably the most honest thing that's ever happened between us. At least now we all know where we stand. Then he left. The door clicked shut. A few seconds later, I heard an engine start outside, the low, expensive kind of engine sound I'd never heard coming from his old truck when they were married. Pattern interrupt. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. We all just stood there for a moment like statues. Then Rebecca's phone rang. She answered with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Hello? She listened, shoulders slumping further and further as whoever was on the other end spoke. Okay, she whispered. I understand. When she hung up, she looked at us with these hollow eyes. That was Victoria, she said. James's assistant. She wanted to inform me that James is filing a motion to modify our divorce settlement. He's removing the alimony provision since I obtained it under false pretenses. Apparently, I never disclosed during the divorce that I knew his true net worth, and I deliberately let the court believe he was nearly broke. Their lawyers are arguing that I committed fraud. They're being generous by only removing alimony instead of pressing charges. My throat felt dry. How much alimony, I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Rebecca swallowed. $50,000 a month, she said quietly. For 10 years. I had known it was a lot, But hearing the number out loud with the knowledge of who he really was made me feel sick. $50,000 a month from a man she'd treated like a burden, from a man I'd poured trash water over, from a man who had never once fought her in court, never once pushed back. He knew Rebecca said voice-breaking. He knew the whole time what I was doing, and he let me do it, because he wanted to see how far I'd go. He wanted to know who I really was. Nobody said anything. Eventually, the doorbell rang again. Gerald opened it on autopilot. A man in an expensive suit stood there with a folder. "Morrison family," he asked. "I'm from the law firm representing Mr. Caldwell. These are your eviction notices. You have until tomorrow at 6 p.m. to vacate the property. After that, anything left inside will be considered abandoned. There's also documentation regarding termination of employment and the legal grounds. Mr. Caldwell asked me to emphasize that while you're free to pursue legal action, he has extensive documentation supporting his decisions. Any lawsuit will likely be expensive and unsuccessful. However, if you accept these terms without legal challenge, he's prepared to offer a modest severance package to help with your transition." He handed Gerald the folder, nodded politely, and left. Gerald opened the folder with trembling hands, flipping through page after page of detailed, cold professional language. "There's a severance offer," he said after a minute. $50,000. Total. Split between the three of us. "That's not fair," Marcus burst out. "Dad, we have to fight this. We have to sue him. We've given that company everything. We have rights." Rebecca shook her head slowly. "He owns everything, Marcus," she said. "The company, the money, the lawyers, the time. Fighting him will cost more than we'd ever win. This is his mercy, giving us anything at all. Mercy." The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "Do you think that's fair?" Really ask yourself that. If you were in his place, what would you have done? As they started talking about lawyers and options and where we could possibly go, my mind was somewhere else. I walked back into the kitchen. The pot I'd used was sitting in the sink. The water that had been in it was on my foyer floor, soaked into James's jacket, dripped from his hair. My hands were still a little damp, as if the disgrace hadn't fully left my skin. That was the moment my story split into before and after. Before I thought worth was measured in salaries and job titles, designer labels, and property values. The kind of car you drive, the kind of watch you wear. I thought a man was only as good as the lifestyle he could wave around like a flag. After I couldn't unsee what I'd done, I had humiliated a man I didn't understand, in a house he paid for while laughing with the people whose entire lives depended on his mercy. I'd called him trash, and in doing so I'd revealed exactly what was inside me. The pot roast went cold on the table. The wine sat untouched. My family walked around like ghosts, making frantic phone calls, looking up apartments we couldn't afford, trying to figure out how to cram 30 years of success into cardboard boxes with a 24-hour deadline. Later that night, Rebecca sat down next to me at the table, her face swollen from crying. "He used to bring me coffee in bed every morning," she whispered. "He used to leave little notes around the house for me to find. He'd remember every tiny thing I said I liked and surprise me with it later. He listened, Mom. Really listened. He was perfect in all the ways that matter. And I threw him away because he drove a truck instead of a Tesla, because he wore jeans instead of tailored suits, because he didn't show off his money." She laughed once, a short, humorless sound. "I married one of the richest men in the country, and I was embarrassed because he didn't act rich enough for me. What do you even say to that?" I put my arm around her, and we just sat there in the wreckage of a life we had been so proud of, realizing it had all been propped up on one man's patience and generosity, a man we never actually tried to know. The next day, movers came. We packed up what we could left, what we couldn't, and walked out of that beautiful house, knowing it was never really ours. The stains from the dirty water were still visible on the hardwood floor where James had stood. I remember looking at them one last time before we closed the door and thinking those stains are going to outlive us in this house. Whoever moves in next will never know what happened there. But I will. I think about James a lot. I wonder what he did when he got home that night. I picture him in some mansion we never saw, washing the last of the potato starch out of his hair, finally letting himself feel all the hurt and anger he'd swallowed for years. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he was relieved to finally be done with us. Was it revenge? Was it justice? Was it both? I still don't have a clean answer. Some days I think he went too far. Firing 3 people, evicting a family, cutting off alimony, all for one night's cruelty. Other days, I think about the years of jabs, the jokes at his expense, the way we talked down to people who didn't look successful, the way we strutted around in a world he built, while acting like we were superior to him. And on those days, it feels like he simply took his name off our lives and let us experience what it meant to stand on our own. We failed, miserably. What I know for sure is this: that pot of dirty water didn't make us cruel. It didn't turn us greedy or shallow. It just revealed what was already there. It showed us that when we thought we were testing James, he had been testing us all along. And we didn't just fail him, we failed ourselves. So that's my story. That's how I went from the woman at the head of the table in a beautiful house, confident in her own judgment, to the woman packing boxes in a panic because she humiliated the wrong man, and learned the hard way that you never really know who you're talking to when you judge someone by their clothes, their car, or their paycheck. If it were you, would you have done what James did? Would you have fired us, evicted us, cut us off completely? Or would you have forgiven us, kept paying the salary of the woman who poured trash water over your head, kept employing the man who watched it happen, kept supporting the daughter who lied about you in court? Do you think that's fair? I genuinely want to know what you think because I wrestle with it even now. Tell me in the comments whose side you're on, or if you think everyone in this story is wrong in different ways. Have you ever misjudged someone and found out later who they really were? Or have you ever been treated like you were nothing by people who had no idea how much power you actually had? Share your story. Argue with mine. Agree. Disagree. Call us out. Call him out. Call yourself out. If you see a little too much of my family in your own reflection, and if this made you feel something, if it made you think twice about how you look at people, hit like, share it with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe for more real stories like this, messy and uncomfortable and painfully human, because sometimes the person you think is beneath you is the one holding your whole world in their hands.